Live! Live from. Probably shouldn't say where I am, even though I've said it tons of times before. Live! Oh. And the embers never fade in my city by the lake, the place where I was born. Nation. As the wind-up toys roll down, muffling the sound of a life lived underground. Believe, believe in me. Believe. All right, so now I have the chat here for now. There's only a couple people, but we'll wait for a second. There's so much going on, as there always is. There's always so much going on. It's so funny because Vladimir Lenin said there was times in history where things just carry on the same for hundreds of years. And then there are times when, or wait, no, he said there are times when weeks take centuries. And then there's times when centuries take weeks. And we're in one of those periods where centuries take weeks, and it's just going to keep on getting more so. Well, Sean, thank you for adding your birth info. We're going to start talking about the sun and stuff first. And then we'll get to all that stuff because we'll look at the sun in people's charts. Let's just give it a couple minutes. Just a couple of minutes. Believe, believe it, believe. Okay, and you know what? I have a wonderful little chart here I was going to use too as a little illustration thing. Oh, here it is. A fun little thing I made. It's so funny. These things look so simple, but they take forever to make. Denise, my Norwegian friend. Little Red Hen. We will eventually get to chart stuff in just a little bit. I'm going to talk about the sun. The sun. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Not really. I mean, kinda. Kinda. You would be honored. I would be honored to have you read your chart. You would be honored to have me read my chart. Oh, I'm going to do a contest sometime too, where I'm going to have people read my chart and see how they do for a free reading and do a free reading promotion. That's what I'm going to do next. What's my Instagram? It's, excuse me, what is my Instagram? It's Frankie _la_ Pepes, I think. Frankie La Pepes, which is like the female pope, which just shows you how wacky I am. Saturn in the ninth house. So here, I am sending myself this chart. And we'll start talking about the sun. Is anyone else coming? I wonder if anyone else is coming. Oh, there's 5 people. Whatever. It'll be recorded for posterity. There's always posterity. So just some quick updates too. Take this over here. Just some quick updates too. I talked about the synodic cycle, right, of Mars and Saturn because we were about to have a Mars-Saturn trine, which perfected on the 30th, right? So what happened right around then? Now let's talk really quick, a recap of themes, right, from Saturn and Mars, right, with the trine. The trine often comes when we start addressing these issues, right, these conflicts. And so one of the things that happened was Saturn, on that same day where we had the trine to Mars, there was the indictment of Trump that came out. So that's sort of, Saturn having to do with legal issues and restrictions. and Mars having to do with infractions, you see, and sometimes even criminal activity. We also had, and this is something we've seen before, right, where we see all these pushes for gun control because of a shooting that happens, usually with Mars and Saturn aspects. So we had thousands, or at least over 1,000 people, march into the Tennessee, Nashville, the Nashville City Hall building, demanding they do something about gun violence. And you may recall that in 2018, around the same time, we had the March for Our Lives protests nationwide. So just an interesting correlation. Hello, don't forget to like. Oh, thank you, little Ren Hen. Thank you. I need to please like the stream. If you want to share it, that's great too. But like the stream, subscribe if you haven't, please, because like this is, I'm trying to make this into a thing. Okay. Help me make this a thing. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Anyway, so you're afraid to go out just about anywhere. Yeah. Don't forget to like and share. Oh, the algorithm. The algorithm. You would love my help on eyebrows. Mine are god awful. Oh, I mean, gosh. Mine are okay, I guess. My daughter says I can pass as a woman. She's so sweet. Excuse me. But Allison Schultz, Allison Chains, hello. Okay, well, we'll start talking about the sun, and I'll keep this around. And then we'll look at people's charts, and we'll look for solar phenomena. You know what I didn't talk about so much in my notes here, and I should bring my notes up. My notes. Oh, that's the wrong notes. That's the wrong notes. I'm trying to talk like Christopher Walken here. Not really. I can't do a good Christopher Walken accent. You're talking to my man all wrong here. You do it again and I'll do something terrible to you. Anyway, I was going to say the line, but you can't say that sort of stuff on. I have to be careful and watch my mouth on TikTok because or it's not TikTok, YouTube, because last time I said things that I probably shouldn't have said. Wait, where? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Doo, doo, doo. Okay, I need my water. So the sun is pretty important in astrology, right? I mean, the sun is the center of its own system. The sun, everything in the solar system revolves around the sun. I always tell people that's where Leo gets a lot of its meaning, right? Because everything revolves around the sun, and the sun is the brightest thing in the sky, right? So the sun came to rule Leo, didn't it? And we'll get to some of that history in just a moment. Let me, you stay there, and you come over here, and you get bigger. Whoa, bigger! I don't know if y'all can see that, but yeah, I'm like a little kid. It's horrible. So, anyway, so the sun, let me pull back up my notes. The sun has always featured as a primary god in all of the ancient pantheons. The most ancient pantheon we know of is ancient Mesopotamia, going back to ancient Sumer and Akkad. The sun god was known as Utu in Sumerian and Shamash in Akkadian. So you know Sumer and Akkad. We have evidence of those people going back to circa 4,500, 4,000 BCE. And so we can trace Utu or Shamash, the sun god pantheon, all the way back to that time. Let me grab a picture. Oh my gosh, I'm so rude. I should bring up a picture of Shamash, of Utu. Shamash, Shamash, Shamash. Where? This is a good picture. Come on, homie. Pull it up. Pull it up. There we go. This is an Akkadian. Well, this is only from about 7 to 800 BCE. And there's oh, wait, I have to move my screen again so you can see Shamash. 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 Shamash, shamash, shamash. There he is. There he is. Big old Shamash. So, but we have stilos of him. You know those cylindrical, they're like cylindrical stamping things, you know? Cylinder seals. We have those with images of Shamash going back to 2300 BCE. As I said, though, we can trace him a little bit. We can trace him a bit older, to 4000 BCE or earlier. Now, Shamash was known, or Utu, I guess, as the all-seeing sun, right? Of course, he ruled light. He ruled sight, because how do we see? If there was no light, we wouldn't see a darn thing, would we? Perception, the organs of perception. There's a wonderful book by an Assyriologist called The Heavenly Writing. Do I have it right here? I do have it right here. The Heavenly Writing by Francesca Rochberg. Or Rochberg? Rochberg? I don't know. But she's an Assyriologist. And this book is all about ancient Mesopotamian divination. It's really, really quite interesting. I'll read you a little bit about Shamash in just a second. This is one of the old prayers, actually, to Shamash. Shamash, king of heaven and earth, judge of all things above and below, light of the gods, leader of mankind, who acts as judge among the great gods. I turn to you, seek you out. Among the gods, grant me life. May the gods who are with you grant me well-being. Because of the dog who urinated on me, I'm afraid, worried, terrified. If only you make the evil portended by this dog pass by me, I will readily sing your praise. Portended by means like, divined by, or the divination indicated by, right? Like when, people read omens. Oh, look, there's a crow. It portends something. I just think it's funny about the dog who urinated on me. But you might hear some words in there that you think of when you hear the sun in astrology. Judge, judgment, leadership, right? He was the leader or one of the leaders of the gods, a leader of humankind. Now we know that, I believe it was Enlil. Enlil was or it was Enki. I think it was Enlil, one of the two. God of the air. That was sort of the leader. But, excuse me, we still have Shamash here. And Shamash was said to be the son of the moon god Nana, who is also known as Sin in Akkadian, and his wife Ningal. So you heard here, right, judge among the great gods. He was known as judge or a dispenser of justice because what? The sun was the highest visible thing, wasn't it? Or at least it appeared to be. Therefore, the sun could see all. He could see everything you did, just like Santa Claus. Shamash is like Santa Claus. You better not pout. You better not cry. You better not shout. I'm telling you why. Shamash is going to, do violent things to you that I can't see on YouTube. Unless I'm reading from a history book. Shamash will take your limbs and, anyway, I'll read that later. But anyway, so Shamash, excuse me, he was upon this, he would drive the solar chariot, right, which carried the sun from east to west across the sky over the course of a day. You might recognize the same symbolism or mythology in other cultures, right? And we'll get to some of those in just a minute. Now, besides justice, he also ruled divination. And I'm sure you can imagine why, right? Well, from his high vantage point in the sky, not only could he see everything you do and judge you, right? It's the original Jesus, isn't it? I'm always watching and judging you. I mean, not really, but that's sort of how that story is played out. He could also see into the future, couldn't he? So he became associated with divination. It's sort of interesting, right, to think about the round over the course of a day. We call that primary motion. which is an effect, a visible effect we see from our vantage point of the Earth spinning on its axis. It appears as though objects are moving from east to west over the course of a day. Again, this is called primary motion. It's the most obvious visible phenomenon for us. And therefore, it became part and parcel of religious rites and indicating, right? We have many different gods associated with the sun at rising, at high 12, and at setting. You see? So we have this motion, and it was thought that Shamash was descending into what they called a nether sky, right? There's an Akkadian word for it, and probably a Sumerian word too. It was a world, a liminal space in between the netherworld, right, or the underworld, and the physical, phenomenal earth realm. So he would descend there to sort of this liminal space and then would reappear again in the east. Now let's look at some other things here because it's interesting that a lot of these significations, we see the same thing in Vedic Valens, right? Now, a lot of this stuff I was talking about before can possibly be traced back as far as 4000 BCE. So now we're going to fast forward to what? 175 AD with Vedic Valens. And we'll see those same significations come up, but potentially 4,000 years later. I need another water. Oh, wait, no, I still have some water. Excuse me. I'm Aquarius rising, the water bearer. Water bearer, not water bear. Water bears are like those six-legged creatures that live in ponds, puddles and stuff. I guess they find them on other planets or on something. I don't know. Maybe not on other planets, but I think I've heard something where they find them in weird places. I don't know. Don't quote me on any of that. Sounds like a bunch of nonsense, probably. You can quote me on this other sun stuff because I have my sources. Francesca Rochberg was the primary source for that other information. The other source of information I have right here, this wonderful thing that just came out recently, is Vedic Valens Anthology. Very, very good. So it's a newer translation, I think, by Mark T. Riley, or it's been compiled, I guess. This is the first, I think, full compilation of the whole darn thing, or at least what they had of it, because there were a lot of parts missing, you see. But Vedic Valens, how does he describe the sun? Well, just a couple snippets here. Intelligence, and that was also one of the associations of Shamash. Shamash was also youth and truth. I have to mention that because I forgot that. So Valens says intelligence, the organs of perception against sight, right? I mean, that seems like an obvious thing, but kingship, rule, judgment, nobility, authority. So these sort of things became somewhat ubiquitous for their significations of the sun. And it's interesting. I mean, some of them are quite obvious that you would associate with the sun. Sorry, I'm looking for something to fidget with. Oh, excuse me. Are sort of obvious associations we think of with the sun. However, it is still quite uncanny that these things did remain really closely connected. And we can probably trace this going through ancient Babylon. So it's also interesting to note that the sun rejoices in the ninth house, which is associated with philosophy, religion, the law, right? Justice, but also God. It's the house of God, and the sun god was God, right? So, anyway. So, now going back to the Babylonians here, the Babylonian zodiac, right? The original zodiac, not as we know it necessarily now, but the original zodiac that we know of with 12 signs divided into 12 equal parts, goes back to the Neo-Babylonian Empire right as it was falling to the Persians. So this is around 450 BCE or 400 BCE, I think they typically say. They usually say the 5th century BCE, which would have been, 4 to 500-ish. So That's when the zodiac as we know it emerges, which is interesting too because it's around the time that the Babylonian captivity of the Jews who were taken, because there was a war where the rain freeze, where the aristocratic citizens of Judea were taken by the Neo-Babylonians prisoner. You see, they refused to pay their stipend, or whatever you call it, their tribute to King Nebuchadnezzar II, and that was part of their deal. So as soon as they started not paying it, King Nebuchadnezzar's like, oh hell no, hell no, and he rolls up in there with an army and just pummels them all and takes sort of the ruling class prisoner to back to Babylon. Excuse me, and that's where the majority of the Babylonian Talmud was written, which is one of the foundational documents of Judaism. Quite an interesting thing. So that's when the original zodiac emerged. And it's interesting that right after that, probably not even 100 years, or maybe about 100 years, that's when Alexander's conquest was. And that sort of united the lands stretching from the Mediterranean to parts of India. And that's where we got a lot of the astrological and religious syncretism. So I'm telling you that story so that we know where these sharing of myths came from. We're going to see a lot of correlations and a lot of consistencies between Indian mythology here and there, with Egyptian mythology here and there, and ancient Greek mythology here and there. You see? So a lot of this stuff came from syncretism. For example, what we call, Thoth Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus was again probably a syncretism, conflagration, or conflation rather, not conflagration, that's fire. Conflation between Thoth, the Egyptian god of the occult and wisdom and writing, and then Hermes, which, was sort of the god of similar stuff. So, Thoth Hermes. Anyway, I mention this because the Babylonian calendar was a lunisolar calendar. It was marked by the sun and the moon. So they followed the syzygies, right, or the lunations, the full moons and new moons, and then the passage of the sun according to the solstices and equinoxes, according to Francesca Rochberg again, in case anyone wants to check that wonderful book. So, because people seem to doubt this kind of stuff. Because the original Babylonian zodiac did use the fixed stars as place markers, the constellations, but the widths of the signs were all standardized to equal sections of 30 degrees. They used a mathematically ideal circle, and that was what was called the sidereal zodiac. It was the first zodiac, right? But it was still the same thing as the tropical zodiac because they hadn't noticed precession yet. Well, we don't know. There are theories that Indian astrologers and Indian astrology isn't necessarily older, but there's theories that Indian astrologers or other people witnessed precession earlier than that. But I'm not aware of any evidence. I know that Hipparchus, the ancient Greek, discovered axial precession, which is the precession of the equinoxes. It's not really so much part of this talk, but just so that you're aware of it, it has to do with the wobble of the earth, right? The earth basically traces this circle in the sky because of its wobble, right, over the course of, I believe it's 25 to 26,000 years. And so every span of time, every so often, the pole star will change. So right now we have Polaris, but around the times of, I think it was 4000 BCE, when we were starting to see ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians start to build their societies, that's when the pole star would have been Thuban, I believe. Thuban. So that's another interesting thing. So the precession of the equinoxes, is there's all these subcycles of about 2,000 to 2,500 years where a different sign apparently appears at sidereal sign rather appears at the vernal equinox. So apparently, according to some people, we're in Pisces, right? And at some point that no one seems to know, we go into Aquarius. So I don't really worry myself with so much of that stuff anymore. But just so you're aware of what that stuff is, because ultimately with the tropical zodiac, we ended up following the sun. And I would argue the Babylonians also followed the sun. Why? Because they assigned signs to specific months of the year, which was based on a solar calendar. Excuse me. It used the moon to determine months, similar to what we do now and what many humans have always done. And then the sun to determine, right, the year. And we see with the solstices and equinoxes certain symbolism that will turn up again. So, now, what does this all have to do with planetary rulers? Well, I'm glad you asked. You probably didn't even ask, but I felt like forcing you to ask, so I asked for you. Well, there's this wonderful little chart, and I made a little representation of it right here. It's called the Thema Mundi. I don't know if you could see it. Can you see it? Can you see it? Can you see me? Can you see me? Hopefully you can see this chart. Maybe I'll make it smaller for a second. Can you see me? Why are you tripping out, cat? Okay, now you can see the whole thing, I'm pretty sure. So you might notice over here some interesting things. You see, we have Cancer rising, and we have all these planets assigned over here. Now, these planets going up on the top, those are just rulerships. That's not how this whole thing was planned. This is called the Thema Mundi, right? It's the hypothetical chart for the birth of the cosmos, of the world, of, whatever we want to call it. So, a lot of things come from this chart. What we do know about it is it probably dates back to the Hellenistic era, probably to Egypt, where a lot of Hellenistic... Sorry, that's loud, I know. What, cat? He probably wants me to let him back into the bathroom because that's where... What, homie? Do you have to go back in here? Okay, chill out. He goes to the bathroom in there too. We try and keep it all in one place. Cats go there, I go there. Well, I have their litter back in the back. So, anyway, that's a whole other thing. So you might notice the sun in Leo and moon in Cancer. The sun and moon, the luminaries, the lights, the source of light for us. They were assigned to the two hottest and brightest months of the year, the moon to Cancer and the sun to Leo. There's some interesting... Now this, I've got Jamitra George as a lot of my sources for this, right? Now, another interesting fact is that Firmicus Maternus, the ancient astrologer, said that this Thema Mundi chart came directly from Hermes Trismegistus himself. And Hermes Trismegistus, right, as we just talked about, the syncretism and the conflation between Thoth and Hermes. Trismegistus means thrice great, which was one of the epithets for Thoth. So anyway, this was said to come from Hermes Trismegistus himself, who was sort of a mythical figure who was credited with creating Hellenistic astrology, or really astrology at all. And people have gotten all kinds of wacky conspiracy theories about that. Like, ooh, he was an alien. Or, ooh, he was an ascended master. We don't know. He was probably made up. And astrology and Hellenistic astrology were most likely, because of all the varied sources we have, compendiums of lots of work done by lots of people over time. So, the Thema Mundi. Now, why did it have Cancer rising? There's a couple reasons. Number one, Cancer marked the Egyptian New Year, right? Because that was when the sun was in Cancer was typically when the Nile would flood, and that was the significant occurrence that happened every year, which was associated with Cancer. But then we also have the heliacal rising of Sirius. What's a heliacal rising, pray tell? It's when a star or a planet or whatever rises ahead of the sun. And Sirius would appear to rise ahead of the sun usually in August, which were called what? The dog days of summer. And they were typically known as the hottest days of summer. And of course, we have Sirius, the dog star, which is, people make all sorts of fun associations with that. Now, it's interesting that we have the moon then assigned to Cancer, sort of representing that flooding of the Nile, because this would happen, the heliacal rising, while the sun was in Leo. So we're sort of putting the sun Leo here, but still representing Cancer with the moon. Now, what's interesting too about this whole heliacal rising of Sirius was that in Egyptian astrotheology, it was said that the heliacal rising of a star or a planet, but typically a fixed star, indicated the rebirth of other fixed stars, or that particular one, which also meant the souls who were encased in those stars. So that's where we get sort of the Hermetic association of souls incarnating through Cancer. Because that did sort of come out from the Hermetic literature, and then we see that in other Western occultism like Theosophy and Alice Bailey and stuff like that, where they say souls are said to incarnate in Cancer. And so we see some interesting correspondences there with Cancer also being the summer solstice. Right, the longest day of the year where the light was said to be at its brightest. The light of the soul, the sun. So anyway, the other thing I'd like to mention about this is each of these planets are at 15 degrees. Yeah, in the chart. Pretend these southern planets up at the top aren't here. So this is the 15 degrees of Cancer is the moon. The sun is at 15 degrees of Leo, right? And so on and so forth. 15 degrees of Libra, Venus here, right? Mars is at 15 degrees of Scorpio. So this is an impossible chart. Why? Because Mercury has a maximum elongation, which means the farthest that Mercury can go in terms of degrees from the sun is 28 degrees. 15 and 15 is 30. So Mercury is going beyond his maximum elongation. How about Venus here? Venus's maximum elongation is what? 48 degrees away from the sun. So Venus is here 30 and 30. She's what? 60 degrees away from the sun, correct? Oh, we have 15. Yeah, 60 degrees away from the sun here. So this is an impossible chart. It's a hypothetical thing. It's for illustration purposes. Now, as we see here, the luminaries, the sun and the moon, were assigned to the two hottest and brightest months of the year. Now, opposite them is Saturn, right? And he was assigned to what? The two coldest and darkest months of the year in the northern hemisphere, right? And astrology was developed in the northern hemisphere, which means the symbolism typically comes out of the northern hemisphere. And no, we don't flip the zodiac for our Australian or Old Zealand friends. We don't. And they don't flip the zodiac typically either, because the zodiac applies to the whole earth, not to a single hemisphere, right? So Saturn, opposite. Saturn was the furthest visible object, and he became associated with being the enemy of the luminaries being the darkest and furthest object. He was thought of as cold and dry, right? And therefore the enemy of the luminaries. In Egyptian mythology, he was considered the serpent of primordial chaos, Apep. And in Egyptian mythology, the sun god Ra would chariot the sun across the sky, right, from east to west, and then would descend into the underworld where he would get embroiled in a battle with Apep until his victory was indicated by his rising again once again in the east. Again and again. Sorry, repeating myself. Um, and Ra also represented what I guess we presented Mat, which was uh, which indicated order and truth. It was more than that. It was a philosophy, right? But it represented the synthesis of the cosmos, the interconnectedness, the interdependence of the cosmos. How everything was sort of um, a symbol for everything else. In the ancient Assyrian diviner's manual, it was a cuneiform tablet cited by our good friend Rochberg here. It says earth and sky are interconnected. That omens on earth indicated omens in the sky, and omens in the sky indicated events on earth. So we have this sort of interdependence going on. Now, we have evidence of serpent gods associated with Saturn apparently going back to 4000 BCE on clay pots and such. And then more recently, related to Saturn in Greece on clay pots dating back to the second century, where the god Saturn or Kronos was seen, handling a snake. No, it's not Ophiuchus, the trouser snake handler. And no, there are not 13 signs. Sorry. There are not. So, what's interesting too is in Indian mythology, we have Surya, who also was said to chariot the sun across the sky over the course of a day. And Surya was also associated with light and truth and knowledge. And one of Surya's children, Surya, sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly either. So please, I'm sorry to my Indian friends who are, wincing at my pronunciation of these words. One of Surya's children was Yama, the lord of time and death. Now, everyone should. And Yama was said to be of the nature of Saturn, or to be of Saturn. The Vedas themselves were written probably around 1500 BCE. So this at least goes back that far, probably. And everyone should. And Yama had many of the same meanings of Saturn. Of course, time, death, the two big things associated with Saturn later. And Kabir Das wrote this wonderful epic poem, I believe circa the 13th century. He was a medieval Islamic Hindu poet. He wrote this wonderful epic poem called The Ocean of Love, which was sort of descriptive of a cosmology, right? Having to do with the birth of the world. And Saturn, or Yama, was the child of Satpurish, right? The one. And Yama became sort of like the demi, or he committed the ultimate sin. He almost had the same function as Lucifer, but to him was given reign or rulership over the material worlds, the three worlds. And Yama was said to be the devourer of jivas, or souls. And so he was the wheel of samsara, right, of illusion. He became known as a sort of demiurge, just like Gnosticism, if you're familiar with that. Excuse me. And so Saturn, or Yama, became considered sort of that enemy, or that obstacle to us realizing the oneness of God, or the all, or the Parabrahm, whatever you want to say. He says Satpurish. So the other planets on the Thema Mundi, what about those? Well, they were just kind of filled in, right, according to their distance and speed from the sun. So you see, Mercury was next as terms of the next fastest planet, and he was assigned to Virgo and Gemini. And then Venus was the next fastest planet assigned to Libra and Taurus, and then so on with Mars, so on with Jupiter, and so on with, well, Saturn was opposite. So we already talked about Saturn. So, and what's quite interesting about this is the planets then partially gave their meanings to the signs, and then their place that they were arranged according to the solar cycle also gave them some meaning. So those are the two primary sources of meaning for the signs. Now, this is particularly since Hellenistic astrology, right? And we probably have evidence of this going back earlier. As I said, the Babylonian zodiac did assign signs to particular months of the year. So it's probable that these also have a connection back to the Babylonian zodiac. Aristotle even cited the Babylonians as having this wonderful, I gotta find the quote, I have it posted, but having this wonderful, uncanny knowledge of how to make predictions according to the stars. Excuse me. So just a couple examples, right? We talked about the solstices, and there's the equinoxes too. So think about this. We have the Aries equinox and we have the Libra equinox. What happens over the course of a year? The light of the sun waxes and wanes, doesn't it? What does solstice mean? It comes from a Latin root, sol and stitios, meaning sun, and stand still. On the solstices, the winter solstice in particular, the ancients would say the sun stands still for 3 days, right? Because it didn't go up or down on its arc. I talked about this quite a bit before, so I don't want to belabor the point. But suffice it to say that these were epic turning points or pivots during the cycle of the year. And the cycle of the year, which was determined by the sun, the rhythm of the solstices and equinoxes became a symbol. A symbol for what? The cycle of a god. The cycle of his death and rebirth, following the cycle or alternation between light and dark over the course of a year. For example, we just talked about the solstices having the greatest light and the furthest light. We have a sign to Cancer and we have a sign to Saturn. Now think of some of the meanings of Cancer. They're very lunar, aren't they? The moon was associated with the mother, with the body, with the flesh, but it's also one of the luminaries, one of the most important planets, with emotion, ebbs and flows. And then we have it be a cardinal sign, right? It's it's when the sun was the brightest in the northern hemisphere. Now think about that descending down, right? We go to Leo, we go to Virgo, and then we have an equinox here with Libra. Now we have where it's equal night and equal day. So neither darkness nor light went out. So we see a lot of significations for Libra come from this whole notion too. From the balance, from deliberation, from making a choice. Libra is the sign of choice, of weighing causes and effects. And it's at Libra where choice is finally made to descend into the darkness in Scorpio. What happens there? Darkness wins out. The nights become longer than the days. And then we get to Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, which is a lot more optimistic. And this is sort of the festival time, isn't it, of the year, when people start preparing for winter festivals. And we have pagan festivals going back quite far, and we could do another episode someday on Christmas and talk about that whole symbolism. But you see, the optimistic nature of Jupiter kind of comes out during that time of winter. Or, sorry, when we're approaching the winter solstice, rather, in Capricorn, where the sun god occultly died, right? Where, we saw all the greenery disappear. Only the indeciduous trees were left, which is why pine trees and everything came to be associated with that time a year later, because they were a symbol of everlasting life, weren't they? So this was the coldest time of the year, ruled by Saturn, Aquarius, and Capricorn. And then we started rising again because the light was darkest here, or it was most hidden here. And this was sort of the, where the, I lost my train of thought. We'll get to that in a second because that's more the symbolism. But you can see Saturn as being the most pessimistic planet. He's the primary malefic. And then we start going out of this darkness. It's almost immediate, right? After the sun stood still for 3 days, that we started having the sun rise again, or at least move northwards again, towards celestial north. And this is a whole thing having to do with the cycle of initiation, which we'll talk about as the symbol for this alternation between light and dark, or is represented by this alternation between light and dark. So Pisces is where we start to ascend towards what? Towards Aries, the other equinox. What happens there? Darkness no longer dominates. It's a time associated with rebirth, isn't it? With Easter and resurrection and all these other sorts of things, even though the light started, right, to emerge again after the winter solstice. But this is when darkness no longer dominates, you see? And that's partly where Aries gets its meaning as well. That and being ruled by Mars, and being cardinal, and being masculine. Excuse me. This is the bursting onto the scene, the rebirth, and the beginning of the zodiac. So you see, fixing Aries at the spring equinox, the vernal equinox, has esoteric symbolism related to initiation, as being that point when the initiate starts to conquer the mind and matter. So that's another symbol here with light and dark that we'll talk about in a second. What's interesting too is the word Solomon, right? Solomon, King Solomon in the Bible, who was said to have dominion, right? He was said to be a great king who associated with some of the same stuff as the sun, right? Wisdom. He was a commander of all these demons, right? Of all these spirits. And truth. And we had the temple of King Solomon, right? Which was the house of God. Which is interesting because Solomon is just the word sun in 3 different languages. We have sol in Latin, we have om in Sanskrit, and we have on in Egyptian. And Solomon is credited with that old saying, nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. So anyway, this alternation between light and dark. What do we mean by initiation? Well, we have symbolized for us the sun god descending into darkness and matter and re-emerging into the light of day and reuniting with its source. Think about the prodigal son, right? It's a parable. Just to summarize, because I talk about it all the time, we leave the father's home to squander our inheritance. We go to the furthest reaches of the world in far-off countries, and we waste everything that we were given. And then as we're eating pig slop, we realize our father's servants eat better than this. Even their stale bread is way better than pig shit, isn't it? So we go back, humbled, with a conciliatory heart, to our Father. Before we even get there, he sees us approaching, and he's overjoyed. He tells his other son, yo, homie, yo, boy, get the fattened calf and slaughter it. We're going to have a feast. Get out the good wine. Call the guests. Let's do this. And the other son's like, yo, he didn't do nothing. And the dad's like, you don't understand. My son was dead and he's alive again. So that's the purpose here. That's the whole mystery indicated by astrology and by Hermeticism, that souls or consciousness streamed forth from the one into the furthest reaches of matter and experience, and then slowly had to grope their way home through darkness back to their source. So light was seen as spirit, and darkness is matter. Think of the symbolism too behind the chart. We had the south, which was visible when you were born above the horizon, and the north, which was invisible when you were born below the horizon. The houses below the horizon became associated with your material living, the flesh and the body, people in your immediate family of the same flesh. And then we had all this stuff in the south, which was visible, which became associated with the mind and the spirit. These houses represented the things you think, your ideologies, your philosophies, your religion, and other people. Not your family, typically. Spouse is sort of straddling in between, you know. I love spouses that straddle, you know. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Darkness and light also became associated with consciousness and unconsciousness, or the conscious and the unconscious. Yeah. Just like we talked about before. Carl Jung talked about shadow work, right? What's a shadow do? It hides things, the unconscious. What do you do when you want to see something? You shine a light on it. What's a light? The light of attention, the light of perception. One of these words associated with what? The sun, with shamash. So anyway, now you might see some aspects and things like that here on this chart. Oh, before we get to that, I wanted to say a couple things. So the Christ myth of death and rebirth, we can see that here as well. We have Aries, the birth in Bethlehem, right? And then we go to Taurus, excuse me, to Gemini, and then we get to Cancer, right? Which is Christ at his zenith, his highest, where he does his ministry at age 30 when he's preaching. And then we have here the condemnation, yeah, where he gets taken, yeah. Excuse me, in Libra, where he's judged by Pontius Pilate. I'm sorry, I get this throat thing. I just have to keep drinking water. My voice sounds like Fran Drescher, except I don't have an accent. Anyway, it sounded terrible. It sounded like a goat. You know, but they did that one time to Fran Drescher on the Conan O'Brien show. They brought out a goat when she was laughing, and the goat was making the same noise. Like, she's like, They basically copied, I feel like they copied her for Lois's voice in Family Guy. But that's a whole other thing. So Christ is judged and condemned, and then dies, is crucified in Capricorn, and buried. And 3 days go by. 3 days. Yes? And then he rises again. And that's the whole thing. But you see how the sun starts moving northwards again with this whole Christ myth. And then in Aries, that's what? We have rebirth again, don't we? So you see how this whole symbolism is here of the sun god. We have the same sort of symbolism with Krishna. You know, Krishna also was killed, but he was wounded by an arrow. And he died and rose again and ascended into heaven, just like the Christ story. So, you know, Christ is often sort of associated with Krishna in some Western esoteric traditions. And I wonder if, again, there's some historical truth to that. It would be quite interesting because Christ was born in the Hellenistic era, you see, right around the turn of the millennium. So, well, you know, apparently, We don't really know a whole lot about the historical Jesus or if there even was one. And it really doesn't matter because the symbolism is what matters and the lessons and the teaching are what matter, right? I don't necessarily believe in anything, but I get a lot of esoteric wisdom from reading the Gospels, from reading all the holy books. I still read the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita especially. I still read the Upanishads, you know. As much crap as I talk about Indian astrology, I'm still very interested in Indian culture and religious history. Now, when I say I give shit to Indian astrology, it's just because it's not older. It's not older. Now, we have evidence of the Vedas going back potentially to 1000 BCE or whatever, but the first Veda, the Vedanga Jyotisha, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that dates back, probably around 6 to 700 BCE, maybe as far back as 1000 BCE, but it doesn't have horoscopic astrology proper. It's got asterisms or constellations. It associates them with different things, but it doesn't represent horoscopic astrology. And Indian astrology uses the Greek planetary or the Hellenistic planetary rulership scheme, right? So, and we know that came out of the Hellenistic era, probably as we just talked about, from Egypt. So you see the syncretism and stuff that goes on. Excuse me, the throat thing. Ugh. I'm so sorry. I wish I could edit that stuff out, but I hate editing. But you see the same symbolism because Krishna ascended into heaven. And it was said that the other gods could not figure out what path he took or, reestablish his path or whatever. And if you think about the symbolism, Jesus was said to, or Christ was said to have reestablished the connection between God and man, right? The temple was rent in twain from top to bottom. And Krishna was said to do the same thing. Reestablish the path between God and man, or at least that was my understanding of the story. People might say I'm wrong. They always do at some point, but there's always dubious evidence when they do. So, again, the myth of death and rebirth. What's it symbolize? Initiation. What's initiation? It is death. It's death and it's life. It's death to matter. It's death to form. It's removing conditioning, removing overcoats. It's self-realization, which also means realizing how the self relates to the rest of existence, bit by bit, progressively, in graded stages. In Tibetan Buddhism, they say, just as those who have gone this way before us have developed the thought of enlightenment and practiced the stages of development, so shall we too, for the sake of all beings, develop altruism and practice the teachings exactly as they have done. You see, it's this string, this unbroken lineage that we keep on having to go through, right? There is a path that was trodden, thank goodness, or this is the mythology, you don't have to believe it, right? This is occultism and hermeticism and all these fun things. There is a path that was trodden prior to us, again, Christ or Hermes Trismegistus or Krishna or whoever the hell, right? Reestablish this path for us to follow of initiation, where we are slowly learning to master ourselves. First, we master the physical nature, then the emotional nature, then the mental nature. Then it's the entire personality, the entire personal nature, that self. And then we approach the next stage where the self totally dies and then is superseded by something else. What is that? I don't know. We have to go through that. But we call it the crucifixion, where will apparently takes over. What is will? We can talk about what will is, but we don't really know. The closest thing we have to will is conscious choice. C.S. Lewis once said that all of our choices, they add up in the end, either making us a hellish creature or a heavenly creature. Anyway, it's important because initiation is the most important thing, because it's the story of how we reunite with our source. So, now going back to these aspect things, and we're almost done here. We're almost done. We'll get to your fun charts. So you see these aspect lines. Now there's an opposition between Saturn and the sun and Saturn and the moon. What's interesting, besides everything else, is that Saturn became associated with the opposition. The oppositions were said to be in the nature of Saturn and therefore the most malefic aspect. What was next? Well, we have Jupiter here for Sagittarius and for Pisces. See how he's trying the moon and trying the sun? Trines became the best aspect because Jupiter was the most benefic. So trines became associated with Jupiter and were said to be in the nature of Jupiter. Then next we have Mars, the lesser malefic. Mars is square the sun and the moon. And being the lesser malefic, squares were said to be in the nature of Mars, right? So we can sort of interpret these aspects this way, and we start getting a bit more nuanced and rich meaning. You see how the symbolism all sort of coalesces into this wonderful system that is so rich, to use that word again, I'm sorry, but it really is. It's so elegant in terms of its interconnectedness and even its simplicity. It's quite complicated with all of its rules and whatnot, as you see, but it doesn't have the nebulous sort of airy-fairy inconsistency that modern astrology does, where everything can sort of mean everything. In an interdependent universe, anything can mean anything. But if we operate by that, then we don't really have a whole lot of context, do we? You know, you could read your own vomit if you knew how to read it, if you could put it in context, but otherwise it's just a bunch of shit, you know? I don't know why that always makes me laugh. I'm such a dork. Now, the interesting thing here is that we have the sextile with Venus. And Venus is the lesser benefic. Therefore, sextiles were said to be in the nature of Venus. And we can think about that when we interpret them, like I said. You know, Mars cuts things off. Squares are, you know, they're difficult, but they're typically not quick. Whereas oppositions are protracted. Excuse me. But I always say every opposition is resolving to be, or begging to be resolved into a resolution, right? Just like a suspended fourth in music is begging to be resolved into a dominant fifth. So, but that's a whole other thing. We'll do a whole talk about aspects because I got a shitload to say about those. But I just wanted to show you how they were related to the thema mundi. So the last thing I want to mention is there's always a greater sun. And if any of you are Leo risings, we'll talk about that in your charts. But there's always a greater sun. In some mythology, the sun was said to revolve around Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, which again is featured quite heavily in occultism, especially Western occultism. But Sirius featured heavily in all sorts of mythologies, especially Egyptian, as we talked about earlier. Now, even if the sun doesn't revolve around Sirius, which it really sort of doesn't, everything in the galaxy is revolving around a supermassive black hole, isn't it? At the center of the Milky Way. So verily, verily, I say unto you, there is always a greater sun. There's always something bigger than us. Even the most pompous Leo and a more evolved Leo recognizes how their integrated, powerful personality relates themselves to a greater purpose. Now we will go into charts and all that fun nonsense. So I will look and see who's posted what. Who's posted what? Where did my chat go? Here's my chat. Oh, let's see. Hello. Is anybody out there? We got Jocelyn Wolf, Allison Chains. You're like one of 2 of 5,000 subscriptions that I am indeed going to tune into. You're addicted to listening to my voice? Thank you so much, Peak ASMR. I think I have an okay voice. That lipstick is bomb. Thank you, Andrea. And Andriana would watch Frankie make up tips along with astrology stuff. 1210. 12. Make tips along with astrology stuff. Yeah, well, I'll start giving more tips. Give us an overview of my natal chart. Sure, I can do that. You have to rely on, oh, your partner called. That's okay. That's okay. Predicted the Nile flood. Yes, it did. Sirius rising, the heliacal rising of Sirius. So we'll get to some of your charts. Oh, thank you for saying I have a lovely voice. I really appreciate it. I have Venus sextile Mercury almost exactly, and that oftentimes. And I like to sing too. Obviously, I'm not the best, but I used to sing in bands and stuff, and I used to record music. Trying to do that again. So we'll start looking at your charts. But yeah, you know what? I'll show you my chart really quick. There's no harm in that. And I've posted it before, so it's like whatever. And we'll look at yours, but just really quickly. Okay. We'll put it over here now. And you say, I only hear what I want to. Lisa Loeb. I'm sorry, I'm like sniffling. It's the fucking cats. I can say that F word once or twice, according to Facebook or YouTube. Sorry. I'm so out of it. I'm so out of it. And you say, I only hear what I want to. Yeah, I'm gonna close that. So I don't know if you could see all my stuff, but it's there. So Frankie Lynch, I've got Aquarius rising, got the Sun conjunct Mars in the fifth house, opposite Jupiter and Uranus. That's partly why I'm so wacky. What's interesting is Alan Oken, one of the astrologers I first learned from for esoteric astrology. I gotta enunciate more. One of the astrologers I first learned from for esoteric astrology was Alan Oken, who's was a flaming homosexual. He died last year. Um, I mean, I would know. I mean, I'm not. I'm sort of all over the place. I'm pansexual. I've never had sex with a pan though. I've beat the hell out of that joke. I really have. I totally have. But so Mars conjunct the Sun is often like, and then opposite Uranus and Jupiter just makes it even worse. So I have to watch myself. I have to apologize later for things quite frequently. I have Chiron conjunct my Sun in the fourth house over here, which is quite fun. And then you see Mercury retrograde in the fourth house. You see my Moon is loosely conjunct Pluto and Saturn, making this fun stellium in the ninth house. And look how many retrogrades I have. I've got Mercury, just out of the traditional planets, Mercury, Saturn, right? Jupiter. And then if you count the outer planets, it's like 6 retrogrades. So retrogrades make it so planets, they take longer to do their good things. So like my Saturn is exalted, but he hasn't been doing anything probably till now. Jupiter is in his domicile, right? In his sign, but is retrograde, right? So he hasn't been doing anything probably till now, and it's just starting. So, and then Mercury, I didn't have anything to say for a long time, and now I have a lot of stuff to say, right? So again, you see the retrograde stuff taking a long time. I'll get to your charts, but someone wanted to see this. So, and you see Saturn's my first house ruler in the ninth house, and I'm an astrologer. I'm obsessed with consciousness and religion and God and not God and philosophy, and this is what I do. I've been involved in spiritual work since I was 3 years old, and sort of officially since I was 12. But it all started when I was 3. So let's go on to everyone else's. Oh, and Lilith is now. See, this has Lilith at 7 degrees because it's using Black Moon Lilith. I don't use Black Moon Lilith. I don't care about those, points. I want to see the asteroid Lilith, which is the rock. And I have asteroid Lilith like 7 minutes away from my sun or my rising. And when people have Lilith conjunct their ascendant, we sort of ooze sexuality. Marilyn Monroe had it. Michael Jackson had it, but people think of him as a dubious character, but I was such a big Michael Jackson fan as a kid. And then we have Jennifer Lopez, right? And then me. So, And I've had other clients with it, and most of us have been through, you know, difficult, I can't use the word, but, you know, SA, if you know what SA is. You can sure think of that, what those initials mean. I can't say it on YouTube, though, which is so silly. So anyway, we'll start doing your charts. Do the oh wait, cancel. Cancel. I'm gonna move this over here so you can see it. So you can see it. And you can be it. Oh. Who's first here? To sum you with a smile and call you like you want me to. That little child. Sean. Is Sean still here? Is Shan or Sean still here? 11, 20, 99. 1999. Gonna party like it's 1999. Little Red Hen. Oh, but Sean, you didn't give me your birth time or your city. Hide your wife, hide your husband. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Little Red Hen, thank you. Pollen season is killing you too. Hey, Priestess Shakti. Park Ridge, Illinois. Jocelyn. Okay, well, is Jocelyn next then? Because I didn't get... If you're going to post your information, I need your birth time and city as well. So date, time, city. So we're doing Little Red Hen here because Little Red Hen. The sky is falling. Chicken Little. Little Red Hen. The sky is falling. Sorry, that's the first thing I think of when I see Little Red Hen. The sky is falling. 1985. 1985. God, my throat hurts. Which isn't good because talking is what I do. I'm a Gemini. And it's 6:03 a.m. 6:03 a.m. And it's... I need glasses. Tampa. Florida. Tampa, Florida. Okay. Little Red Hen. Someone wanted to talk about something else, though, too. Didn't someone want to talk about something else? Well, anyway. Oh, look, your son's in the first house. First house sons think they're very important people, right? The sun is a symbol not only of our... It depends on the system you're looking at. In esoteric astrology, which I was raised in first, it's a symbol of the personality. Excuse me, it's what's most visible about you. It's what you put out to the world. Modern astrology sort of does that to your rising sign, which is so silly. The rising sign is you. It's the whole you. It's known as the soul in ancient astrology, right? I think I read this last time. Demetra George, she goes through all these ancient astrologers talking about the first house. And loads of them, the earliest ones say it's the soul, the life breath, the soul. Okay? So anyway, I won't go into all that too much but that's part of the philosophy, you see. So, but sons were also sort of known as the soul in some contexts. But I think of the rising sign particularly as the soul. People often say that, the sun is what you do, it's your, karma or whatever. I mean, they say Saturn is karma. Everything's karmic. The Buddha defined karma? Volition. He said, karma is volition. Having willed, a person acts through thought, deed, and mind. Or what do you say? Thought, speech, and mind. Or something like that. Or body, speech, and mind, I guess. So you see, it's the stuff that you do. And everything is the stuff that you do. Rising sign, I think more of as dharma. Right? Your purpose, your duty, what you're here to do. But the sun's what we're attracted to. For example, I have a 5th house sun. Guess what I'm attracted to? So anyway, Um, I mean, the fifth house is Sax, right? So the first house, though, is self. So the interesting thing here was Saturn and the Sun in the first house. There's a dual sense. Well, and then Pluto's conjunct the ascendant too. My daughter has that. It's quite interesting. You're just going to be shattered periodically through your life, darling. Just get used to it. It's never easy. The sun is never ending. Do 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 do. Oh, what's that song? Oh yeah, crawling in my skin. These wounds they will not heal. Right, that's Pluto conjunct ascendant kind of. Um, so it's just, but that's people say Pluto's transformation, and what they really mean is life-shattering crises. I have Pluto square in my ascendant. I feel you, darling. It's a very similar thing, and every so often we just have to be broken apart and put back together. Now, what I was going for with this dichotomy here between the Sun and Saturn being in the first house, like I said, the Sun in the first house is typically a very important person, like Sarah Palin, or my mother has Sun in the first house. And and sorry, but Saturn does the other thing. It makes us look for our value through other people. Whereas the Sun in the first house, we have a lot of self-value, right? We feel this light emanating from out, like, oh yeah. But Saturn there does the opposite. We start asking for gold stars, like, please praise me, daddy, shit like that. It's again trying to find our value through other people, where we have to find it in ourselves. And the North Node, right, in the seventh house is sort of saying, oh, you were almost born at an eclipse. You were almost born at an eclipse. This is a disseminating, no, I'm sorry. This is a balsamic moon, or coming off of a last quarter, moving towards, what's this called? A new moon, right? A balsamic moon. Oh, yeah, Venus conjunct Pluto, but out of sign. Anyway, so, but learning how to have, learning how to have constructive relationships is sort of a big part of this thing. But you don't do that by looking for your value through other people. You do it through finding your value in yourself. And not just that ephemeral value that, comes with possibly arrogance or assuming that you're good. It comes through pain and suffering, which you're probably accustomed to with Pluto and Saturn in the first house, and Pluto conjunct the ascendant. So, Mars conjunct the moon in the 12th house. If I were you, I'd be careful of drugs and alcohol. I'd really be careful of drugs and alcohol. I don't know. Have you ever been in a spiritual retreat? You have your ninth house ruler in the 12th house. So, seclusion, or being in a, what do they call those? Like what are they called? Where you have like a commune or a compound or a cult, cults and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe mental illness too. Maybe you have to deal with severe depression. Maybe you're neurodivergent. I don't know. Um, doo, doo, doo. Generational wealth, money from dad. I don't know. Real estate. But more importantly, let's talk about the sun. So we talk about sun in the first house, but how about eclipses? So you had the eclipse in your first and seventh houses. So you just came out of the big existential crisis since Halloween, right? And then you're moving in to this whole sixth house, 12th house stuff, right? This is going to be a sixth house eclipse for you. This is going to be about you withdrawing from things, right? You probably had this big sort of, it could have been painful, it could have been difficult, I don't know. But like I said, big existential crisis. Like, what does this all mean? Who am I? What am I doing here? Like, what is the point? All these big questions that can be very crippling. And then, it sort of leads you to experience yourself in a new way. But then you have to sort of process all that shit, don't you? You have to retreat into the healing of solitude. What happens with the sixth house oftentimes is more physical. It can be things like health problems coming up that take you out of getting involved in lots of stuff, outer stuff, right? The 12th house is seclusion, whereas the 6th house is sometimes the physical stuff that puts you in seclusion. You know, you got to be Howard Hughes for a while when this is going on. Unfortunately, wear Kleenex boxes on your socks and pee in jars because you don't go outside for a while because you're healing. And then eventually you come out of the cocoon into the light of day, into the 5th and 11th house axis. But that won't be for another year or so. So, or is it a year and a half? Year and a half, I think. Yeah. Nodal lunar precession. We'll do an episode on the moon like we did here on the sun. So we can talk about lunar precession, right? So that's a whole nother thing because that moon cycle, that nodal cycle, is quite important in terms of eclipses, in terms of eclipses. So, we talked about that. We'll probably move on to someone else's here. Oh, but Jupiter's going to go into your 7th house. So that's cool. You might meet someone, or if you're already with someone, you'll see the relationship stuff get better. Improve a little bit. The unfortunate thing, though, is having Saturn in the 5th house for a long time. I mean, Saturn's always somewhere, right? But, you know, life could get quite unstable for a while, uncertain, stressful. You might worry about your kids quite a bit if you have children. So. When you get to the 6th house eventually in 2025, 2026, then you start being the stable, badass bitch, you know, who starts taking responsibility for things, although it's not easy. So, but let's go to someone else's because we got to get to some people who are very patient. Why does this keep happening? I hate when Windows does it, when you like click on something and it goes like all crazy. You know? Like, yo, chill. Did anyone post any other stuff? Oh, honey lemon tea helps with talking. Yeah. Wait, did we do you, Little Red Hen? Isn't Pluto in the 1st house too? Wait, did we do you, Little Red Hen? Was that you? Oh, yeah, that was Tampa, Florida. You have been to the sub-basement of hell in the process of healing and completely reconnecting with self. Oh, really? You never caught that before? You're approaching an eclipse. Yeah, because you see the nodes? For an eclipse to happen, the nodes have to be within 15 degrees of the sun and or moon. Do you know why that is? Does anyone know why that is? Oh, you gotta leave? Leave me. Oh yeah, leave me a review. Been homeless. I'm so sorry, darling. Well, you probably were homeless just recently because the Saturn was going through your 4th house. I'm not meaning to laugh, but it's just uncanny. That was just me, you read to filth. To filth? ADHD, priestess of Persephone, no family, no money. Your partner is secure. Cool. Yeah, so the eclipse thing. Why do the nodes have to be within 15 degrees to make an eclipse? What is an eclipse? What are the nodes? The nodes are where the moon on its axis intersects the ecliptic. What's the ecliptic? It's the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun, which ends up looking like the orbit of the sun around the Earth, right? So we have the moon orbit intersecting the Earth's orbit around the sun. When the moon is ascending towards celestial north and intersects it, that's called the north node. When the moon is descending down its what's it called? Axis or whatever we want to call it. Then it intersects going south towards celestial south, which is the south node. You see? The nodes then are the intersection between the orbit of the sun and the moon, right? Or the earth and the moon. So when those things align, what does that do? Right? If the sun and the moon are conjunct the nodes, that means there's an eclipse, right? Because those things are aligned. If you have sun, moon, earth, or sun, earth, moon, it's called a syzygy or a lunation. Syzygy means alignment, right? And we'll do a whole nother thing about prenatal lunations or syzygies because I do a lot of research, or I have been doing a lot of research on that. And that stuff is pretty effing cool. Or pretty hecking cool. So let's do the next chart. Do the next chart. My daughter was so mad about this pineapple. She said I broke all the things in it from squeezing it. But I said, no, it was already like that. But, see, I need fidget toys too. I had some of my own and then she took them. Or maybe they're in the cart. Because this isn't cutting it. This isn't cutting it. Ooh, I have this butterfly thing. Ooh, papa, 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 papa. But that's loud. That's loud. I mean, this pineapple's already... Ooh, slime. Slime. This counts too. Well, I have to get it out. So who's next? Who's next? Did anyone else put... You don't touch either just MMJ. Oh, yeah. Mary Jane. Yeah. Yeah. Multiple sclerosis. Yeah. Well, goodness. That's wild. So, but hopefully while Jupiter is going to... Well, you're going to have the eclipse in your 6th house, and I think it's going to be more of a good luck eclipse, so you might see some improvement. Now, who else is here? Oh, Jocelyn. Jocelyn. Does anyone else have stuff here? Oh, yeah, I need a little more cowbell. I got a fever, and the only cure is more cowbell. Oh. I'll tell you what, that boy ain't right. It's like you got a problem with concentration. Who else's stuff is here? Otherwise, I'm going to Jocelyn. Sean didn't put their stuff down. Sean or Shan? Sean or Shan? Sean. Okay, Jocelyn, it's all about you. Libra Moon be like, well, yeah. Hide your wife, hide your husband. Yeah. Exactly. You like actual chickens? The sky is falling. Okay, Jocelyn. 9:15. Ooh, 83. You were born the same year I was. We're about to be 40, my darling. We're about to be 40. Oh my God, not 40. Not 40. Oh no, it's going to be 40. If you remember Mr. Bill, then you're old like me. Mr. Bill. Oh no. Okay, Jocelyn is 10:58 a.m. 10:58 a.m. I hate when my voice starts. Favorite story growing up? Oh, Little Chicken Little. Was that it? Park Ridge, Illinois. Every time I think of it, I have family in Chicago, but I always think of the Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's 150 miles to Chicago. It's dark and we're wearing sunglasses. Let's roll. Anyway, I love Blues Brothers. Okay. Rawhide. Get 'em up, move 'em out, get 'em up. Rawhide. That's stuck in my head now. Sorry. All right, Jocelyn. Oh, well, this is boring. We have another Scorpio rising. Oh, we don't want to do... It's like the same thing again with Saturn in the 1st house. Well, Jiminy Christmas. Don't we have anyone with any other risings? Well, your sun's in the 11th house. So we can talk about that too. The 11th house is all about... It's about the people who help us. It's benefactors, right? Why? It's our hopes, our wishes, our dreams. Now, when we look at primary motion, right, that means moving clockwise from east to west over the course of a day, like the sun does. You think about the 11th house rising up towards the 10th. That's where it gets its meaning of hopes, aspirations, dreams, and wishes, right? And then the 10th house is where everything was most visible, right? Where we accomplish stuff, where things actually happen. It was known as the house of action or praxis. Excuse me. Oh yeah, Mercury retrograde. Like it's so funny. It's like, wow, you got Mercury exalted and in rulership, but he's retrograde. And who does he rule? He rules Gemini, your eighth house. Your eighth house. Did you ever have a friend pass away? Like early on, did you have someone close to you pass away, like a friend? Doesn't necessarily have to mean that, but doesn't necessarily have to mean that. I'm just wondering. Um. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I already said that. Watch out with debt. I mean, do you have issues with putting things on credit, spending money? I mean, the other thing too is learning to face your fears and trauma. So, fear probably factors in quite a bit with the Chiron in the eighth house and the North Node again in the eighth house. So that's the direction you're moving in. But learning how to deal with your own fears and trauma and stuff like that makes you, um, better, more able to deal with other people or useful, if you will. I should have the sound off on this. Anyway, so, and it's quite interesting too. I wonder if you had anything to do with therapy or therapist or social work or because Venus rules your 12th house and is like exactly conjunct your midheaven. So, and then she's retrograde, she's stationing retrograde. So, anything that she would do that's relatively good would happen later in life, you know. We already talked about Scorpio. We talked about Saturn in the first house, but same thing goes for you. You know, stop looking for your value through other people. Now you're not going to stop it. Well, I got to see if that's something that even I'm not looking at the not looking at the no debt besides school and house, fears and trauma for sure. Yeah, well, yeah, that's the more psychological side of it. So, oh no, no friend died. Okay, well that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear about that. Well, and you see, Mercury is exalted too. It's just that he's retrograde, which is why I said the friend dying thing. But maybe you're good with money. Maybe that's the thing. Um, you see, with the eighth house, we also see things like because it's debt or other people's money. We see things like budgets, people who do accounts payable stuff. You know, um, people who work with other people's money or who work in banking or finance or something like that, or sales. You know, selling things. But I wonder if you'd be sort of a therapist type too, right? 12th house ruler up there, or someone who's adept with working with other people's pain or suffering. I mean, you're not necessarily all that, but people might at least treat you as a confidant. You might be a bit possessive too about partners. It's funny because Venus also rules your seventh house and is up there in the 10th. These are the people that they want to be with. They want to be seen with people. Like I always joke, it's like the Disney princess that like, oh, I want to be seen with the prince kind of thing. Or, the dude who wants to be seen with the trophy, model person or whatever, in terms of heterosexual people. But the same thing goes for queer people, wanting to show off a little bit or show your partner off. And again, with Leo, probably a bit possessive. Probably a bit possessive. It's like your partners can have friends and not be cheating on you. Like chill the F out. Chill the heck out. So, oh, you had that. We were born the same year, so you had that Jupiter conjunction too. Oh, but your Jupiter's direct, you punk. And your Jupiter's in his own term. So you have a lovely Jupiter in the second house. I mean, I'd hope you'd be good with money. I would think you would be good with money. I think you'd not have to worry about money, or you wouldn't struggle a whole lot, you know. Um, anyway, uh, but Saturn in the first house, that's the big thing. You were having the existential crisis. The existential crisis. Again, I do the mush mouth thing, like you were having the you were having the existential crisis too, and Saturn happens to be in your first house too, right? So learning how to get over the gold star thing, right? The relationships that are the most fulfilling are the ones that we're willing to walk away from, because when we're too scared to leave, we let people treat us like dog do. So, don't we? Um, Anywho, first house ruler in the 10th house. I mean, that's pretty good omen. I think you'd probably be more successful than I am, that's for sure. So, that's for show. Oh, Capricorn moon is rough, isn't it? Capricorn moon is rough. It's hard to let people in. You trap yourself in your own cage. Finally, someone let me out of my cage. But no, seriously, you bottle yourself up. You want to relate to people probably, but you're too scared to, you know. It's really terrible. You think about the moon in a Saturn sign, all caged up, whereas in Cancer, it lets its emotions flow. It lets the slime sort of move around. But then in a Saturn ruled sign, it's like, you know, crack the slime. It hardens the slime. I'm such a dork. But you see what I'm saying? It puts around this thick candy shell, although it's not very sweet, this thick dog dew shell around its soft, gooey, chocolatey emotions that are so sweet and wonderful. I love Cap Moons and Cap Venus because they remind me of, Mama. I like cold women, cold. I like, when it comes to men, I like more warm and, nice and stuff. But when it comes to women, I want cold ice queens. I want Elsa. I want an angry mama. Not angry, tough, but nice. I've been through too many angry mamas, believe me. Oh my God. No more of those relationships. You see, when you're too scared to leave, you let people treat you like dog do. So that's the thing to remember. Okay? So the eclipses were doing stuff to you. They go into your 12th and 6th house, which is all about healing, right? And all that fun stuff. Jupiter goes into the same stuff he was doing for her. Your 7th house, maybe you'll meet someone. Maybe your relationship stuff gets better. Excuse me. But you would definitely get help from your friends. You would get, right, like the Beatles song, I get high with a little help from my friends. People would support you. You probably have connections. You get opportunities through people you know. It's who you know, right? I'm entertaining. Oh, I'm just being a dork. Thank you. Well, who else do we got here? It's who you know. Wait, what? What happened? Where did I close? Where did I close besides my clothes? Oh. It was the chat. Where's the chat? Where's the chat? Where's me toothpick? Love that movie. Do you see the light? What movie? What movie did I say? What movie did I say? Oh my God. Carpe diem, seize the carp. Who else wants to put their birth info in? I did Little Red Hen. Shan or Sean did not put their stuff in. Allison Schultz needs more cowbell. Andrea Phil. Anyone else want to put their stuff in? Otherwise, I'll go back to my chart and I'll show you what's up with mine. I can show you some fun things that happened in mine. Jocelyn. Scorpio gang gang. Gang. Oh, Blues Brothers. Yeah, I love Blues Brothers. Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis. Anyway. Whoa! Okay, until someone puts their stuff in, I'm going to pull my chart back up because I want to show you a couple things that are quite interesting. So, excuse me. Oh my God. I want to see my thing. I hate Windows so much. I hate Windows. Windows sucks. Windows sucks. Wow, that was cool. Sorry. There was this like newish Beavis and Butthead episode where they're like, they see this movie, ask for your daughter's hand in marriage, and they think they mean like, giving hand pleasure. And so they go to this guy's house whose daughter they like and like, excuse me, sir, can we get your daughter's hand? Anyway, I thought it was funny. Can we get your daughter's hand? Can you see this chart better? You can't see it, can you? How do I? How do I? You can't see it. Oh, I gotta move it over here. I gotta move it over here. Now you can see it. See here. No, stop. You ever notice how I Just Can't Wait to Be King is like the same melody as Under the Sea? Right? Doodle doo 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 doodle doo 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 doodle doo 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 doo. Anyway, you see how Mercury's retrograde there? So by progression, when I was 3 or 4 years old, when I had that wild experience I always talk about, that's when Mercury went direct by progression. You see? And I want to show you another thing here. Ugh, stupid thing. Progressions. I want to show you about progressions because we talked about that the other day. Everyone should watch that episode on progressions. Everyone should see that because it's like a whole little free class on progressions. So check this out. I'm going to emanate this. Emanation. Emanation. Okay. I guess that's as much as it's going to go. Okay. So, let me go back in time. Effing solar fire, chill out. So, you see here, I want to show you progressed lunations. So, this was 2016. It's a pretty wild year. So, this is the year, right? During this. Now, what's very interesting about this is you see the nodes here. This is the north node, which means the south node's over here. So this is 9 degrees away from the sun, which means the south node is 9 degrees away from the moon. What does that mean, pray tell, that we just talked about? Ooh, I should go over here where you can see me more. Because I was off camera, I think. That means it was an eclipse. Because what's an eclipse? When the nodes are within at least 15 degrees, or at most 15 degrees, within 15 degrees, right, of the sun and the moon, right? The syzygy, the lunation, because they're aligning, right? Just like we talked about. So my progressed lunation when I was what? I was 35? No. I can't remember how old I was. 33? No, 32. 32, right? So this is basic, no, 33. Anyway, but this is when the breakup of my marriage started in 2016. Actually, right around July, which is quite uncanny, you see? But when you do progress lunations and things like this, they come on slow and they take a while, right? So, this was a whole protracted event. This took a while for this whole dissolution to happen. But often progressed lunations are like a high point. So right before this happened was, I had the house and the dog and the kid and the wife and, was trying to be a dude and all that fun stuff and had a good job, had a good jobby. I was a manager of multiple restaurants. It was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. Well, I mean, there were good parts. The staff were great. I love the staff. And I hated being a manager. Ugh, I hated it. Because basically what managers are supposed to do are make employees good with being screwed. you know, you're supposed to make getting screwed more palatable, while allowing the upper management to do nothing. Anyway, this is just me whining. But quitting my 20-year job was one of the most amazing things I ever did. And it was when the eclipses were going between my fourth and 10th house. So now one more, and then let me see if anyone is anyone putting up their chart yet? Or did anyone put up anything? We'll do another one. Erica, hello. Hello, my darling. Oh, hello. So I want to show this progression too, because this was another eclipse. See, when it's an eclipse, they're extra traumatic, So both of mine were eclipses that have happened. So that was 2016. Now let me go to, okay, what was this? 2002. So this was April of 2002. This is when I started that 20-year job, basically. Well, I started in January, and then along with that, my dad ended up unliving himself with a firearm to the head. So again, a traumatic event around a progressed eclipse lunation. So you might want to check those progressed. If you were born, if you had an eclipse within the first, I don't know, 20, 30 days, you should probably check it out of your life. Because what are progressions? It's a day equals a year. So, the first 30 days of life, or like the first 30 years of life, that's how we take it as symbolic timing representation. So that's just an interesting thing with these progressed lunations. My progressed Mars had just gone into Cancer around the time I came out as trans. So that's sort of interesting, Let's see if anyone else put their charts in there. But you see how important the sun is. Oh, Erica, yeah, March 2nd. So you just had your Pisces birthday. You Pisces, you Piscus. You fishy fish. Pisces was originally not a fish. And for ancient Babylonians, it was a swallow. So you see how these things change. Aries wasn't a ram. He was basically the farmhand, like the hired laborer. So, which then later became the shepherd, right? And then later became a ram somehow. So Erica. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Stupid hiatal hernia. It really sucks. Can I say sucks? 1996. You don't want to know what I was doing in 1996. I was a little goth kid. I was wearing black lipstick, and I had a little vial of my own blood around my neck when I was like 13, 14. 14, 96? Yeah, I was 14. 2:02 a.m. I was just a little wacky doodle kid. Okay. Excuse me, how unprofessional. Why don't Windows just do what I want them to do? Just do what I want you to do. Is it that hard? Okay. Well, Sag rising, you got Pluto conjunct your ascendant too. What's with all you people? Are you all crazy? What's with all those Pluto people? I mean, I'm one of you, but what's our deal? Where's my other sock? Oh. Where's my sock? Again, if you saw what we were talking about earlier, you're just going to get shattered periodically through your life. Life is just not easy. Enjoy it. Get used to it. You also have Mars square your ascendant, so Fun. Oh, you have Mars combust like I do. So you probably can be quite aggressive. I bet your dad was not a nice person. Um, your childhood home was probably unstable. You might have had an abusive or absent father. And what's this? What's this? What's this? There's something in the air. What's this? What's this? Doobie doobie doo. So Uranus is opposite the moon. Mom may have been a bit out, like all over the place, maybe a bit erratic or, weird, unconventional. You like Miss Frizzle or something, or worse, like just a temper. It's an opposition, so it might have been, just unpredictable temper. Someone who's terribly inconsistent. Maybe you had to be a parent to the parents. Maybe you had to be a parent to the parents or one of the parents. There's cat hair in the slime. It's gross. There's cat hair in everything. Everything has cat hair in it. Cat hair is just like ubiquitous. It's a part of life. Every time I drop something on the floor, no matter where it is, not even here, outside, when I pick it up, there's hair on it. The only logical conclusion is that the world is covered in hair. I can't think of anything else. So, bad dad, perhaps. But it makes you a bit of a tyrant around the home, too. I mean, you probably internalized a lot of that stuff. Maybe you felt weird as a kid with that Chiron in the 11th house. Like, like either you're bullied or left out. It's like the kid, like the last kid being picked for dodgeball or foursquare, whatever it is he used to do, you know? But I have a ninth house moon too, like you do. We're the kids who are asking the big questions in life. You know, we're like the little gurus in training, typically. We can also be, when it's the moon too, we can have like a lustful sort of desire after being, to know everything, right? Like to be the guru or to be the teacher or whatever. And it's a glamour. I mean, it's sort of narcissistic sometimes, like, oh, I can I can help people. Well, that whole notion that whole notion is a bit narcissistic, isn't it? Because who says that anyone needs your help? Service is different because it's not personal. Like when we personalize it, then it becomes, nothing bad necessarily. I mean, it can cause mischief because our intentions are in the wrong place. But ooh, look at that. I don't know what's funny to me. It's the slime thing ish. Sorry. Sorry, ADHD. I'm so sorry. Um, I don't think you're great with money. You probably don't have to worry about money too much, but um, well, Jupiter's not happy in the second house. What's Jupiter rule? Your first house? So learning through lack, you know? Jupiter rising is all about penetration into the mysteries, the unknown. It's about reaching new goals, which is funny with, you know, having been trine your moon. You have a gibbous moon like I do. You have a gibbous moon. So a bit more optimistic, visionary, looking ahead towards the future, that sort of stuff. And I gotta be careful of my ring. This isn't my Mama Inanna ring. My talisman. So Pluto conjunct the ascendant. We talked about that earlier. You're probably creepy. You probably don't mean to piss people off, but people like at work, they'd be like, who the heck does she think she is? You know, screw her. Because people, you would have sort of a dominant personality. Like you go into a room and people get uncomfortable because you have a presence. You're not trying to do it necessarily. I mean, I'm jealous of that Leo moon and that Pluto thing right there, but you're hampered by all that Pisces stuff. So you're still kind of a wet blanket, you know? Probably hard to stick up for yourself sometimes. Or hard to get your stuff. See, there's a lot of childhood trauma. People treat you like a child probably. And then, with the trauma around that, perhaps, then it's like you let people do what they want once they put you in that space, that headspace of being like a kid again. And like I said, you probably had to grow up too quick. And Venus isn't happy there. Wait, hold on. Let me see. Where's the chat? I just want to look at the chat. I don't want to like cause a bunch of things. Let's see, all very true. Brisadell. If you love a cat or dog, Budgie. No, my hairs are everywhere. Loads of stress toys. Oh, Empress Adele, hello. Got Jupiter conjunct Neptune and trine Chiron. You love listening. Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, Pluto trine the moon. I mean, it's a wide trine, but still, well, it's mom was probably a bit wacky. You may have had a taboo relationship with your mother where you guys talked about sex and drugs and things like that. Or maybe she was, domineering or abusive or stuff like that. But, I mean, it's a rough one. It's a lot of Pluto, isn't it? And Mars square your ascendant, more of that aggressiveness stuff. Your own temper will get in your way, or your own sense of, Mars in Pisces isn't really known for its anger so much as it's known for its resentment, you know. So the quicker you let go of your resentments, the better. But you're still reactive, you know. Like if you don't get service properly at a restaurant, you're like, where are you? you know, or this is wrong. Snapping your fingers. I don't know. That's what I keep thinking of. Mercury in Aquarius, that sees patterns other people don't see, unusual kind of thinking. So, but eclipses, I was talking about that. So you're moving into the light of day here. You were in the seclusion phase. And now you're moving into the fifth house with this wonderful little eclipse. Just don't get pregnant. That could always be a thing. So use protection. Use protection. Because the next 6 months will be highlighting your fifth house. Maybe you just start learning to have fun again. Yeah, Erica, you're passive aggressive for sure. But you're still reactive. You still might have to apologize later for the things you think and say about people. Because you probably gossip, Yeah, huge pushover, exactly. Yeah, huge pushover. So, wanting people to like you is normal. It's just it shouldn't govern all your stuff, So anyway, but you're good at speaking and writing. You're a good communicator. Like whatever your job is, again, speaking, writing, communicating would be your bag because Mercury rules your 10th house and is in the third, So you're obviously very intelligent. Probably a bit weird, of course. It's strange. People are like, what's her deal? But that's all good because people would probably seek you out for solutions to unusual problems. But this eclipse looks really good for you unless you don't want to get pregnant. I mean, I'm not putting that evil on you. Use protection, but this is about having fun. You're going to be more keen on having fun now. So, did you ever get an inheritance? Because oftentimes part of fortune in the 8th house, you get an inheritance. I mean, you're still relatively young, so. Excuse me. You're a huge pushover. Well, that can always be taken care of over time. Like I said, we can't suppress thoughts or feelings. We're not going to stop our patterns or change our patterns. All we can do is learn to see them. I was talking about shadow work earlier and Carl Jung, right? Carl Jung said that which remains unconscious manifests outside as fate, Bobby. That didn't sound very good. But he said, yeah, that which remains unconscious manifests outside as fate. What does that mean? It means the things we don't see about ourselves. They just repeat themselves through us, these unconscious patterns. Democritus said, the gods live our lives for us. What does that mean? It means fate. We just acquiesce to our fate all the time as long as we're unconscious. We use our charts to become, I mean, I love sex and money more than anyone. Like, yeah, let's learn about sex and money. But we're also able to use it as a tool for self development, to see our unconscious patterns, and bit by bit to become aware of them. And what happens when we first see them, we recoil in horror, don't we? And then when we see them bit by bit, we start to get some space between them. Oh crap, there she goes again, doing that same old BS. You know, she's on her bullshit again. And then we start to get more impersonal about those things and they fall away by their own accord, you know? And they fall away by their own accord. It's about consciousness, about self realization. And this is why we use words like light and darkness. It's making the unconscious conscious. Empress Adele, Erica with a K. Erica with a K. Hello, my name is Susie. That's Susie with a Z. Freaking TikTok, I have that song all over the place. Hello, my name is Susie. That's Susie with a Z. You're always shedding. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's hair everywhere. They're like tumbleweeds, aren't they? So, so anyway, but you see, the self-consciousness thing and the self-realization thing is the most important. Nothing else ultimately matters. Anything that takes us away from the investigation of consciousness is ultimately a distraction. I hate to say it because we have to attend to life. You got to take care of your kids. Shooby dooby la la. Dooby doo, dooby doo boo wah. Black days, blue nights, doo wah doo wah. Doo wah, dooby doo boo wah. Doo wah doo wah. Blue days, black nights. So anyway, you see how that's the most important thing. Because we don't have any will otherwise. We don't do anything. We respond to stimuli. We're pretty much unconscious about most of what we do. And even when we try to be conscious, we're still stuck in our heads. We don't have any control over our thoughts, feelings, or sensations. And you can't just start exercising control over them anyway. If you try and force yourself to do things, you're going to lose. One of my mentors used to say, if you fight the universe, you always lose. It didn't stop me from trying, right? And I still try unconsciously all the time. I always have problems with God, even though I need God in a weird way. And that whole experience I had when I was 3 was all about God, too. I just was. There wasn't any need for God or no God. It all was. It all was. Everything is. Everything is breathing. Everything is alive. It's just that we're dead. That's why we don't see it. Because we're absolutely dead. We're dead to the world and not in a good way. We're not dead to its identifications. We're dead to life. We're all afraid of death to a certain extent, but ultimately we're all afraid of life. That is terrifying to us. We're too afraid to really live. And typically, it's through the realization and the reality of our mortality and of death that we really start getting the will to live. It's ironic, isn't it? There's this wonderful practice by a guru I followed, G.I. Gurdjieff. And some of you familiar with Western occultism will recognize that name, G.I. Gurdjieff. Oh, Priestess Shakti. Okay, I'll do you quick. But G.I. Gurdjieff had this whole essay, and we'll do this one time because this changed my life. And I think I was 22 or 23 when I first read this. It's called The Last Hour of Life. It's basically the practice of putting yourself in the space that you've just died. I'll have to read this whole thing to you all sometime. It'll be a whole thing in and of itself. And I've been meaning to do it because people need to hear it. And no one is aware of this whole thing. The Last Hour of Life, it really needs to be popular because it changes lots of people's lives. And you do this often, but you act as if you have just died. And put yourself in that space as much as you can in your creative imagination. And you look back at your last hour and you ask yourself, were you satisfied with that last hour? Could you die now? Rest easy, letting go your last breath, being satisfied that you did everything in your power to be here, to be fully present, to be fully awake and aware, to be poised and waiting for whatever comes, like the kid is waiting for his father's sailor. Anyway, we'll do that all one time. In the meantime, we'll do Priestess Shakti, because she's always very supportive too. Thank you, Priestess. Oh, Shakti. Oh, I love lime water. And my voice is always so hoarse. Do wop. Excuse me. I'm blue. Be do be do woo woo. Go 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 yeah. I'm blue. I'm blue. Do do be do be do boo woo. Anyone familiar with that? Was the ICATs. You know Ike Turner from like Ike Turner and Tina Turner. He did one of those like bands. Hits home. It's later than you think, so enjoy yourself. It's later than I think. Well, I don't know what that means. You mean later where you live? Are you like on the East Coast, West Coast? Tunes all day. You're welcome. I'm blue. Be-do-be-do-boo-boo. Gong, 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 yeah. What was the date? 11/4. 79. Shakedown 1979. Cool kids never have the time. On a live wire right up off the street. You and I should meet. June bug skipping like a stone, with the headlights pointed at the dawn. We were sure we never see an end to it all. And I don't even care to look at Priestess's chart. She's a Leo rising with Mars in the first house, and there, something. You probably get dry skin and turn red really easy. When Mars is in the first house, I mean, it can make someone sort of a good leader type. It can make someone perhaps more aggressive or reactive. It can give us sort of a reddish hue, you know, and it can also make us a bit impulsive. We get dry skin oftentimes too. You may or may not get that, you know. So you wonder what whose chart was like. That's weird, right, Lowell? Whose chart? June bug skipping like a stone. Excuse me. You're like my polar opposite because I'm Aquarius rising. Ike and Tina dust my broom. Sorry, it's a song. So predictable. So, astrological education and music feed your appetite. I'm so funny. Thank you. At least I think so. People say I'm not funny quite often. So I'm always dry and slapping on the moisturizer. And yes, red. Yes, my darling. So that's okay. It just is what it is. That's the box of crayons we were dealt. The lots in life. So, well, and this is interesting too because Jupiter's not happy in Virgo, and Saturn is in the second house. So perhaps you grew up poor, you know, or not a lot of money. So Ike Turner, I know. I'm blue, doobie 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 woo. Go, 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 yeah. Anyway, that's a great song though. It really is. I first heard it because it was in Hairspray, the original Hairspray by John Waters. I'm a big John Waters fan. I'm really creepy, so like I like weird movies and stuff. I think I saw Pink Flamingos when I was like 11 or 12. 12. So yeah, I'm a weirdo. I'm very strange. All that fifth house stuff, you're probably a fun person, a bit childlike. Mercury's not happy though, so you probably got ADHD. You know, you like to joke around and have fun and that kind of stuff. But you probably waste time. You probably get sidetracked a lot and you waste time and procrastinate. It's called Blue. I think it's called Blue. I can't play it right now. Let me see. Let me make sure it's what it's called. iCats. Not I'm blue, da ba dee da ba die, da ba dee da ba die da. That came out when I was like 14 or 15. No, I think I was in high school. I was a raver. And people were playing that. I'm like, no, 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 no. Do not play that song. Um, iCats Blue. Not iCats. iCats. No, it's Blue Cats. I don't want blue cats. I mean, I might want a blue cat. A blue cat. iCats Blue. Yes, it's called I'm Blue. That's what it's called. I'm Blue. You're neurospicy and funny. Neurospicy. What's neurospicy? Neurospicy. Is your brain spicy? Does your brain taste like chile? Anyway, maybe growing up poor, and then Jupiter's not happy here too. So, did you get into debt issues? Oh, Joni Mitchell, Carrie. I can't remember. I love that song, Carrie. Oh, Anyway, Cyndi Lauper does a cover of it. It's so good. Cyndi Lauper is my number one gal. She's my mommy. Cyndi Lauper and Marianne Williamson are my mommies. Marianne Williamson's my mommy. Come on, mommy, save us. Save us, mommy. Um, Jupiter rules the fifth house, though. So you probably have children, or you probably have multiple children. You did get into debt twice. Yeah, I mean, that's Jupiter ruling the eighth house in the second, and he's not happy. So, yeah, you just have to watch putting things on credit and taking loans and stuff like that. 12th house ruler in the 10th. Now, are you a therapist type? Because that, once again, like 12th house ruler in the 10th. Like, do you work with other people's pain and suffering? Do you give people advice? Stuff like that. Do you do it? You probably felt like you were a late bloomer too. Like no direction earlier in life. But the sense of lack. You see, the sense of lack. Not having enough. There's not enough to go around. Like mom and dad probably said, there's not enough. There's not enough. Was dad a selfish person or sort of narcissistic? Like all of his shit was more important. Excuse me. Excuse me. All of his stuff was more important, rather. Um, Something about the home. Unusual home, unusual upbringing. Maybe unusual dad. You know? Maybe unusual dad. History, genealogy, maybe? Those things are important to you? Hmm. The other thing about the fourth house is it's the deepest, darkest parts of our chart. It also represented the mysteries early on, you see. You were a late bloomer in every way, and there was so much lack. Dad was in prison for being a selfish a-hole. Well, that's the 12th house, too, isn't it? Oh, moon opposite Uranus, like the last person. So mom probably a bit crazy all over the place, right? Your Life, Carrie, great song. Got called mom just tonight by an older man. Made me question your bossy advice. Yeah, I usually tell partners I like to call them mom or mama or mommy, you know. But then I'm usually the dominant one too. Like I like to be in control, but at the same, like I'm a dominant princess, I think. I go both ways. I switch too. I do. You know, it's just I'm used to doing all the things. I'm used to doing all the stuff. Like I love rope. I love rope. I love zip ties. I love, bondage, obviously, because that's all bondage. I used to have this like rig hung up from my ceiling with the whole spreader bar deal and ropes and stuff, but I haven't had that in a while because She was, and you are too. Yeah. So, a bit crazy. A bit crazy. But you see, the moon is exalted in Taurus in the 10th house, so you do have some modicum of success going on. You know, you do get lucky in a way, or you do make something of yourself. You might do some sort of spiritual work with your midheaven in the 9th house. You know, or maybe you're a paralegal or have something to do with the law. I don't know, or academia, working at a college. I don't know. But you see, now the eclipse is going into your 9th house. You're always the more masculine partner. Why? Well, it's because you're Leo stuff, you know? Well, not your Leo rising so much as the Mars in the 1st house and the Mars in Leo. You know, it's more of a dominant personality. Mars is also sextile Pluto, so that's even more dominant, right? Mars is trying Neptune though, so you got to be careful. Like, you know, being too preachy. It's like the firebrand preacher, you know? Like, think of Joel Osteen. Like, God, the Word of God. Amen, brother. It's the Spirit. You know, those churches where people start doing this stuff? My older brother was an evangelical pastor, and he hates me, thinks I'm evil, you know, because I'm a Mason and I'm trans. But it's where people do this stuff. Oh, you know, like if you gotta make a show, you know what Christ said? He said, don't give your alms in public like the hypocrites do, like the scribes and Pharisees, to be seen of people. Go into your secret place, go into darkness, go to where you're solitude and alone, and then pray to your Father, because then your Father sees your intentions, what's true in your heart. Right? He said the scribes and the Pharisees were hypocrites, that they washed the outside of the cup and left the inside filthy. You see the symbolism, yeah? You see the symbolism. Who would rebuke you? Who would rebuke you? Jesus? He didn't rebuke anyone. He rebuked like actual evil demons and stuff. Happy Easter, heretics. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a pretty big heretic. I mean, shoot, I'm a Mason. You got excommunicated for being a Mason, and I was raised Catholic. I need more water. These cans are empty. Yeah, happy Easter. I think today was Palm Sunday, right? I think today was Palm Sunday. And then Ash Wednesday, there's this really funny story. One of these comedians I used to follow, Artie Lang, he was a terrible gambler. And he ended up putting, you know, some bets with this really dubious bookie who was an Italian guy, you know. And so he had to go pay the bookie quite a bit of money. He comes in and the bookie's on the phone with some other people, right? And the bookie's screaming. He's screaming, I want that guy, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I want to do this to his family. And I want to do that. And I want you to take his dog even. And blah, 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 blah. And all the meanwhile, he's got an ash cross on his forehead that he went to mass to get because it was Ash Wednesday. So just the irony of these like really violent people with the, you know, going through all this stuff. Oh, Joel Osteen would rebuke you. I'm sorry. Can I say one more F word? I'm not going to, but you know what I mean? Heck him. Heck him right up his. Heck him right up Uranus. You know? F him. Washing feet? Yeah, well, there's a lot of interesting things about washing feet and symbolism. First of all, you know, the Essenes, who are often credited with, the Gnostic Gospels and all those things, the Nag Hammadi texts. Those are credited often from coming from the Essenes, and they did ritual bathing for purity. I mean, they were a hardcore cult, basically, you know, but this is where they said Jesus came from, right? And so they had ritual bathing. Now, what do the feet do? That we walk on the feet. They touch the ground, right? They support us. They're like a foundation. There's something about the feet that has to do with understanding. When you entered a room, you removed your shoes, right? What was all about? That was about removing this false understanding, removing the personal side of you, right? Well, this is some symbolism behind it. You can read your own symbolism into it, you know. And then there's this idea of washing the feet. right? Jesus gets his feet washed, right, by the woman. And it's a sign of incredible humility, right? And for him too, to allow the woman to do that. And then I believe he washed someone else's feet. You see? And again, once again, it's about washing the earthly side of you, the side of you that touches the earth, right? It's removing. St. Paul said we see through a glass darkly, right? We see through identifications. We see through conditioning. We see through false personality. Me just as much, if not more than anyone, right? You'll see me get angry all the time and freak out over nonsense. But we can be aware of these things and we can realize that we put buffers between ourselves and the truth. We insulate ourselves from seeing the truth because it's painful to see. Oh my God, I don't do that. I don't do that. No, I only did that because she's such a bitch and he was a jerk to me and this, and that. We justify ourselves endlessly for the things that we do, right? So, anyway, learning to wash the feet is removing that earthly side of ourselves that is attached, that is driven, right, by earthly desire. We're not going to stop having desires, but we can learn to see where these things create disruption and disharmony between us and the rest of existence. Life is always painful. Not going to stop being painful. But our relationship to pain changes, you see? So, good Catholic lass. In nombre de Patri et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Well, I changed that in Latin. I don't speak Latin, but I mean, when I was growing up Catholic, we didn't have to learn the Latin, but it was around a lot. Excuse me, but I always would say, um, in a nombre mater, and then I forget the word for sister. Oh, et filia, right? Or the daughter, in the name of the mother, the daughter, and then Spiritu Frankie. Spirit of Frankie. Ramadan in full swing. That's correct. It is Ramadan right now. So to all of our Muslim friends and brothers and sisters, happy Ramadan. And yes, make sure you gorge yourself at sundown, please. Gorge yourself. It's so funny because they talk about eating all the time, don't they? I used to work at a university and we used to prepare Ramadan boxes for our Muslim students and friends. And oh my goodness, they were definitely looking forward to sundown. Definitely looking forward to sundown. Oh goodness. And yeah, you know what Easter is? Easter's around the time of the equinox, right? Again, the rebirth once again. So, no longer does darkness hold the light. Darkness is like hell. And we're told in the Gospels, the gates of hell could hold him not, right? That's the bursting forth of the sun god or the Christ myth or Krishna or whoever else you want to talk about, you know. So, yeah, washing the feet. So, that's some interesting stuff. Remember, the feet are the part of us that touch the world. And they also support our standing, our understanding. So, you love April. April flowers. Or is it April showers? April showers. April showers. Ooh. Well, so anyway, if no one has anything else, I've done like 2.5 hours now. So, I'm going to go ahead and go. But this was good stuff. You know, I think this was pretty good. So, anyway, um, we talked a lot about the sun and about your charts, and so we'll go ahead and just say I love you. You're beautiful, and have a wonderful whatever you're having. This is Saturn Girl. Like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and comment on all this stuff because it's interesting. Thank you for playing along and for having fun.